Hello, my name is Rob, and welcome to Directors Uncut. If this is your first episode, we put filmmakers from all corners of the globe onto a huge list that covers everything from romantic comedies to transgressive art house. And then we turn it into a lottery of directors by using a random number generator to pick a name out of the hat. Whatever name comes out, I am joined by a rotating cast of guest hosts to discuss them and their work through two films. Today I have been joined by Kat from the Hollywood News. Hello there.
Hi.
It's been a while actually. I think, what was the last proper episode you were on? It was Wes Craven, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is my second proper episode and a lot of what I've been watching, but this is, my second director.
And what a follow-up, honestly. But also, I've been joined by Andy from Road to Knowhere.
Evening, how are we?
We're all good. We record this out of time, so this is like, the 6th of December?
Yes.
Yeah.
So who knows what the future holds, because this isn't coming out for a while, so...
So we're not all bankrupt from Christmas yet. We still got that to look forward to, then the long month before we get paid and all the fun shit that happens after.
It's just the way the world is right now. I mean, say 2 weeks down the line, who knows what's going to happen? So at the moment, everything's rosy, but
yeah,
who knows what surprises the world has in store.
In the middle of a Winter World Cup, so I've just been watching that and keeping myself to myself, really, with that. So, interesting stuff. I think I was on the episode with Kat as well, actually, the Wes Craven one. So
I think you're on the first one. She was on part 1, where you did Last House on the Left and Cursed, which is a hell of a double.
So we got to do the Great Curse. That was
right. So I was on the New Nightmare and Scream, wasn't I?
Yeah, that's a much better double bill. I mean, Cursed has the honour of being possibly the worst werewolf transformation I've ever seen.
Oh, really? Not seen it.
You've got to go pretty far to be worse than that, I'd say. I'm sure there is, but...
Worse than Van Helsing? Van Helsing, if I remember everything in Van Helsing, looks terrible.
Yeah.
Stumped you there.
I can't remember Van Helsing, to be honest.
Yeah, so that's probably the best way.
I'm just agreeing. So I don't know how I segue from Van Helsing to the director that we have today, but so I won't try. So the director that we have, it's a follow-up because the last episode was a review of 2022. But before that was part 1 of Ridley Scott, where we talked about Blade Runner and Gladiator, two very, very mature movies from his vast filmography. And in this episode, we're doing something a little bit more feminine, especially in the lead roles with Alien and Thelma Louise. So... a nice quadruple bill. Don't try and quadruple bill them, that would be awful.
Well, fair length of time in that.
Yes. It'd be an old day where you'd need to pick up after Gladiator, honestly, because that's not a great movie, is it?
Really? It's been a while since I've watched it, but I remember loving it because, but again, it could be nostalgia. My granddad had it on DVD, and it was one of his first DVDs, and we used to watch it on his old... what was it called? Was it just an Apple Mac? Like, was that the old computers? And it was just a big screen, and it had like a Caterpillar game on it, and it used to have a disc drive in it, and I used to watch it all the time. So I remember it fondly, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was good.
It's every 15-year-old, well, of our generation anyway, every 15-year-old boy's favourite movie, along with Scarface.
So that kind of tracks as well. So would have been 2099 Gladiator?
Turn of the millennium, it was around then. Okay. So this is a difficult question because Ridley Scott is sort of is a forever present, really, director. He's been working for so long in so many different things that to ask either of you, when was the first time you heard of him? It's a tricky one, I imagine. So, Kat, can you answer that? Is it answerable?
I mean, I don't necessarily know the first time I heard of him, but I was a child that was allowed to watch the Alien trilogy as it was when I was a kid, when I was 7. So I guess I was introduced to the work of him when I was 7, because I think I saw this before I saw Legend. Yeah, I saw Alien before I saw Legend. So yeah, that was probably my first encounter with him. Yeah, it was the early 90s. It was a different time.
Yeah, video shops didn't really care. I mean, it had age ratings on, but they didn't care. So Andy, same question.
Funnily enough, just what I kind of touched on there, it was Gladiator. I've not really known. I mean, if it was 99, 2000, I'd have been 12, 13. So directors wasn't really something I focused a huge amount on.
Of course.
But Gladiator would, have been definitely my first introduction to him. I've still never seen, like Kat was saying there about Legend, I've still never seen Legend. Alien was much later, and off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it would have been Gladiator just because of that whole thing with the DVD having it there, and it was such a cultural kind of bled into the culture of that movie really well. People would quote it, and as you said, 15-year-old boys were quoting it, and I was the prime age for the kind of Swords and Sandals movie that it was.
Yeah, I do think Legend is worth a watch, by the way. It is very camp 80s fantasy.
Is it Tim Curry playing the devil, maybe?
Yeah. I think he's just sort of become affectionately referred to as the big horned guy because he's just his skin's all red and he has huge horns.
I think he's credited as the Darkness.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and it's Tom Cruise before the braces. It's worth a look. For
really?
that alone.
So it seems like it's maybe along those lines of like Never Ending Story and things like that, and Labyrinth.
A little bit darker.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Those movies are always worth a watch for the camp funness that they are.
Oh, yeah, anyway, Tim Curry's going to be good as well. Or at least watchable.
Yeah. He chews all the scenery, that man. Delightfully so, though. Delightfully so. So we have two movies that I mentioned earlier. We have 1979's Alien and 1991's Thelma and Louise.
We found this laying there. No blood. No Dallas. Nothing. Come on, anybody saying nothing around
I'm
this
thinking.
place.
Unless somebody has got a better idea, we'll proceed with Dallas's plan.
What? And then don't blame the others? No, you're out of your mind.
You got a better idea?
Yes. I say that we abandon the ship. We get the shuttle and just get the hell out of here. We take our chances and just hope that somebody picks us up.
The shuttle won't take 4.
Well, then why don't we draw straws?
I'm not throwing any straws. I'm for killing that goddamn thing right now.
Okay. Well, let's talk about killing it. We know it's using the air shafts. Will you listen to me, Parker? Shut up!
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
It's using the air shafts.
We don't know
That's
that.
the only way. We'll move in pairs. We'll go step by step and cut off every bulkhead and every vent until we have it cornered, and then we'll blow it the fuck out into space. Is that acceptable to you?
I think it's a very straightforward synopsis. So asking for a synopsis of Alien is probably one of the most basic that we've had in quite a while, actually.
I've got one here. I've just written down a wee note. Near 21:22, after receiving a mysterious transmission, the crew of the Nostromo decide to investigate. What they find is a life form more deadly than anything ever witnessed, and they face a battle for survival.
Yeah, that's as straightforward as it needs to be.
Yeah.
So, Kat, what do you think? I mean, again, this feels so redundant asking what you think of Alien, but I'm still going to ask it nonetheless. What do you think of Alien?
I am a massive Alien nerd, the whole series. And I was 7 when I first watched Alien. And I remember the grown-ups in the room watching it with me had massive smirks on their faces for like the first hour because they knew what was coming and I didn't. And I was like, what? And as much as I love the series, I would say that Alien is the one that scared me the most. By the time we got to Aliens and there was like soldiers shooting stuff, I was like, okay, yeah, sign me up. I'll be a colonial marine. I'll go and kick some aliens. But Alien really scared me and still does to this. I think of all the 4, it's the one that I have seen the least, which is not to say that it's not an amazing film. It is, but there's something about it still that can make me feel a little bit uncomfortable.
It does have that effect. Seen the least though. That's the one I've seen the most. I think this is about the the fifth time I've seen it, and I've only seen Aliens once. I think I'm doing it wrong, maybe.
So when to put this into context, when I say I've seen it the least, I've seen Aliens easily 1,000 times. Easily. It's just, I mean, I started watching it when I was 7. I had like 30 years to be like watching and rewatching this film. I can literally quote it like from, well, actually I can quote it from 20 minutes into 20 minutes before the end, basically when the Marines turn up to before she rescues Newt, because I find the start and the end a bit dull when you've seen it that many times. And then I did my university dissertation on Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection. So I've seen them probably like 40, 50 times. Alien, I'm probably closer to like 15 to 20. So yeah,
Oh, wow.
It's still seen it quite a few times, just not as much as the others.
Yeah. So, Andy, have you seen it 15 or 20 times? Can you compete with that?
I won't be far off that, yeah, but I'm kind of similar to Kat, where Aliens is probably my most rewatched of the whole series. It's because it's kind of eminently rewatchable action movie / sci-fi. It's just a popcorn movie more so than this one maybe is. I would certainly say 15 to 20 maybe isn't far off myself as well. I kind of hold this franchise in a similar pedestal's maybe the wrong word, but a similar regard to the Terminator franchise, as in I saw Terminator, so I saw Aliens first, and then I saw Alien, and I saw Terminator 2 first, and then I saw Terminator. So I'm quite kind of similar in feelings to those sequels as I am to the originals, as with Terminator and Alien. And I mean, it is fantastic. It is easily the scariest Alien movie, I think.
Well, it's scary for the right reasons, anyway.
Yeah, well, yeah. We don't need to touch on Prometheus.
What I really appreciate about Prometheus and Alien Covenant is they're really making a case that Alien 3 and Resurrection aren't all that bad.
Yeah.
I know I was on the wrong side of it. I like Alien 3 and Resurrection enough, but it was a very unpopular opinion for a long time.
I've always kind of liked Alien 3. I did a rewatch of Alien Resurrection for our podcast, actually, and I really didn't get on board with it, but it's still better than Covenant and Prometheus.
Yeah. I had to do my dissertation on Alien 3 and Resurrection because too much had been written about Alien and Aliens, so I was kind of like forced into those films. But originally I watched Alien like on the Monday night, Aliens on the Tuesday night, and Alien 3 on the Wednesday night. So I was immersed in that world as a 3-year-old, and the ending of Alien 3, I was bereft. So I was so excited when I heard that Alien Resurrection was being made, and I was so jealous that my mum got to see it at the cinema because she was over 18 and I was barely in year 9 at secondary school. And it's fun. It's a fun. It's basically Joss Whedon's prototype Firefly. That's because he was one of the script guys, and the crew of the Betty are basically the Serenity crew. Just a bit swearier.
It's a very strange director they picked for it. Is it?
I can't remember his name. The director of Amélie and a lot of quirky French comedy dramas.
City Lost Children. Done one. Very strange director to pick, but then he had Ron Perlman in that, and then brought Ron Perlman into Alien, which is, I suppose, a good thing. Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, I didn't hate it or anything. I just it was what it was.
That's the interesting thing about this as a franchise, though, because for a while at least, every iteration was wildly different than the previous one. I mean, the first one is a haunted house in space. Space Truckers, haunted house in space. The second one is a Colonial Marines action movie. The third one is a prison escape movie. I don't know what you'd call the fourth. Sort of an escape? No, that's kind of repeating Alien 3, isn't it?
Maybe more... I think
disaster movie. That might be a good way of looking at that. Disaster movie.
Yeah, especially if you've seen the kind of director's cut ending for Resurrection, where they land on Earth, don't they? Is it Resurrection, that one? They land on Earth in the director's cut. It's a kind of desolate wasteland, and they're very, very different in tone. I think just handing it off to different directors will do that.
As for Alien, I mean, I don't like saying sort of these grand statements because it just sounds full of hyperbole, but I genuinely believe Alien's one of the best movies ever made. I have no bones about saying that. I think a big part of its success is just the confidence of it, because this is a movie in which basically nothing happens for the first 58 minutes. I mean, that might not scan because I watched the director's cut unwisely this time. But to take such a long time to do anything, what is it, 1979? That's a confident move. Because the first hour, I mean, you'd be hard pushed to find anybody who wouldn't say it's boring. It's very matter-of-fact, mechanical, space truckers doing their jobs about the admin and the responsibilities and all the sort of power relationships and dynamics of the crew. It's just such a brave movie. I don't know any other movie around that era which would have such a wild 180.
It was something that I kind of picked up on this rewatch more so in terms of just even the opening to the movies, a really slow crawl across a planet or across the kind of silhouette of a planet, and then it also takes the time after the title's revealed to then just kind of show you the inside of the ship for a couple of minutes. And there's no kind of big opening set piece to drag you in. It's all very slow, very methodical. Maybe surgical isn't the right word, but certainly clinical. It's all about the small details, giving you the details of the set and letting you kind of immerse yourself in it a wee bit more and see how lived in the Nostromo is as a ship.
It's because even when you are introduced to the cast, it's not immediately straight to plot. It's just general chatter about them waking up and stuff. It really does sort of take its time getting to anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And most of the first hour is sort of interrelationships. The engineers don't like the cabin crew. Nobody likes Ripley because she's sort of the Weyland-Yutani sort of representative, the sort of business head, the one who runs all the books.
She seems to be this certainly more, running the books and by the books. Certainly, I think one of Ridley Scott's strengths is in his ability to build characters from different backgrounds and from certainly looking at his work as it's kind of progressed. It's something that he's kept going maybe a wee bit. I've not seen any of his recent stuff because I don't have a huge amount of interest in it, but it seems to be quite a big strength of his. But he makes the Nostromo crew likeable in their differences, like with Harry Dean Stanton just being the engineer guy that's just there and he's worried about his bonus and they're worried about their money, and it's just almost going through, as you're saying, the kind of mundane without realising what's coming up, obviously at the time of release anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a great cast just on that. I mean, Harry Dean Stanton is one of the two engineers with Yaphet Kotto, and Yaphet Kotto, I just love that man. He's an American institution, and the two English actors in John Hurt and Ian Holm.
Yeah.
Tom Skerritt was effectively the star, wasn't he? He was, when you watch this movie the first time, I assume when people watch this the first time, the assumption is the heroic Captain Dallas of the ship with his green teeth. That's the problem with Blu-ray, isn't it? You do notice these things. He's the hero. It's, again, I don't know any sort of comparison point really that I think Dan O'Bannon was incredibly smart with what he was doing. I mean, I think he's an incredibly smart screenwriter altogether because another film that he's done, Return of the Living Dead, that is not a horror comedy. I don't know why people keep on calling it a horror comedy because it is so horribly bleak. It's about the sort of futility of life and how dying hurts, which is a horrible thing. And he does this really, I mean, he sort of demystifies a space movie because around this time, 1979, Star Wars is king shit, let's be honest. Yeah. And this is about as far away from Star Wars as you get. It is space truckers, and space truckers aren't interesting. The trucker lifestyle isn't interesting. So,
I mean, because I think everybody did expect any sci-fi film that came out a couple of years after Star Wars was going to be Star Wars, and the fact that they didn't, would have loved to sort of travel back in time and go and see it on opening night and see what people's responses were, because their big idea of sci-fi up to that point really was Star Wars, and this is not that. There's no crazy looking aliens as such, and it's not on another planet or whatever. It is just on this ship, and it's with real people, and it's with people who still exist today. I think that's what's made it hold up so well. This whole divide between the engineers and the pilots and stuff, that's still conversations that we're having today, with people not being paid their worth and getting their right cut of the pie.
It's deceptively timeless in that regard, yeah. And as well as the gender politics as well, it's an ageless movie, really. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you can process this movie how you want, but it is about the fear of male rape. That's what the film is about. With HR guy, I mean, he must have been such a lovely, well-adjusted man, really, shouldn't he? Because the first we see of his face hugger, which feels like such a normal part of pop culture now, the face hugger. You can get Funko Pops of it, I imagine.
I think you can, yeah. I've actually looked to get one.
But once upon a time, you saw it for what it was rather than the branding, and it's a little scorpion figure which sort of impregnates people through the mouth.
Yeah.
Which is just so bleak as a horror monster. Horror monsters are supposed to chase like teenagers in their underwear through corridors before gutting them. This is a very intelligent horror movie.
And it's adding to that as well, obviously, as we find out later on, it keeps the host alive. It's not about killing the person, as you're saying, with the horror antagonist. It's not about murder necessarily. It's about invasion of the body. It's about an unwelcome invasion of the body, and also what we later learn with the face hugger is you also can't remove it, or it'll melt the face, or it'll rip the face off. It's totally intrusive, horrific being that is maybe, again, as you're saying, in terms of being ingrained in popular culture nowadays, it's lost its mystery and it's lost maybe its nastiness. But
it's lost it. It's just people see the brand rather than what it actually is.
Okay, yeah.
It's like the face hugger. It's cool. It's the alien thing.
Aye, yeah.
Without actually processing what it is. Yeah, let's get to the Xenomorph. What are people's feelings on him as a horror monster, especially in this one? Because it gets expanded upon, the mythology gets expanded upon in further movies, but as far as his character, I guess let's call it his character in Alien, what are your thoughts on the Xenomorph?
I think it's one of the greatest movie monsters, villains there is. It's such an intelligent being, as much as it's an animal in many ways. Its instincts are so good, and I think it's the perfect organism. It's got acid for blood, so you can't easily kill it, especially if you're on a spaceship, because if you shoot it, there goes your ship. And it can camouflage itself. It's got this tail. It's got the teeth within the teeth. It's got so many different ways that it can hurt and can kill you. And at the same time, it can be anywhere. It can be lurking anywhere. And the greatest things outside of the dinner scene that Ridley Scott pulls off is that realization that it can grow. So you see it as this tiny baby thing, and then the next time they're looking for this tiny little thing with a cat carrier, and then the next time you see it, it's like 7 foot tall. And that is just how quickly that can go from being little to giant is terrifying.
Yeah, but I will be honest, I don't think that's the scariest scene in the movie. Anything to do with the Xenomorph, actually.
Okay.
I think I'm always terrible with actor names. Make sure I got the right one. Ash, the cyborg, Ian Holm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When the jig is up, and I don't think they realise he's an android at that point, but they realise he's not exactly collaborating with the team effort to get home safely. There's a scene in which it's on that motif of rape where he overpowers Sigourney Weaver and tries to kill her with sort of rolling up a magazine and trying to force it down her throat.
She gets helped out, and that's just before you find out about the android, because he gets clubbed in the back of the head, and then he starts malfunctioning, and there's white fluid coming everywhere. And I remember first seeing that when I was quite young and not fully grasping what was happening, like just seeing a thing with white fluid coming out of it, and just I remember that being really horrific, though, as you're saying. It's just obviously it's a horrible scene. As you say, what the whole movie is about rape, and it's a very rape. Not whole movie's not about rape. Sorry, that's the wrong phrase.
About rape,
yeah. And it is a very rape heavy tone in that, and it's the emotionlessness that he carries out with it as well. Before you figure out that he is the android, before you realise, it's how cold and forceful and calculated he is at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, he's an android. If he wanted to hurt Ripley, he could hurt her in many other ways. And it's interesting that the choice that is made by it is to, well, I think they're porn magazines, is to roll up porn magazines and then stuff them into her mouth. It's a very phallic thing to do when, I say, if he wanted to end her, he's obviously a lot stronger because he's an artificial person.
Yeah.
And that rape theme, it's just dawned on me now. For such a long time, I thought, why a crew of 7 in a spaceship, which is the size of a small city? Because it is, really, and Nostromo is massive, and it's such a small crew. But I think it plays into that sort of idea of themes of rape about it, really. I mean, there's so many parts of town that people can't walk through for fear of things happening to them, and that's what the whole ship is. The whole ship is a whole series of skeevy corners that you can't go around. You got to walk the opposite way away from, which is quite shrewd. And
it's all dark as well. It's poorly lit, as you're saying. Kind of goes back to the kind of lived-in aspect of the ship as well, which adds to the uneasiness as the movie goes on.
It's a crummy ship.
That's a shithole.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what's going on with that room that has all of the water coming down. And
I was only going to say, it rains in there. Like, that can't be good for it.
No. I mean, why did they bring a cat? I mean, that's the only question I have about the movie. Why did they bring Jonesy? Because that's just a poor cat. Poor cat.
That cat is in on it. Like, I've seen this film enough to know, and I've lived with cats all my life. If you watch it and you just follow Jonesy, I mean, he literally gets Harry Dean Stanton killed because he's looking for the cat. Yeah. And the cat sort of like, look, there's this look that always sort of passes between the cat and the xenomorph. There's like, it's yours, mate. And then at the end, he goes missing, and Ripley has to go and find him. And then again, suddenly the alien. I just feel that there's some sort of unspoken pact there between this cat and this other creature that's like, well, why don't you leave me alone and like kill all these people? And it's fine. It's sort of like Predator meeting Predator in a way. But I'm very, in terms of the cat's treatment, yes, poor cat, because if there was ever to be a cat in a cat carrier, I would not want Sigourney Weaver to be carrying it, because that poor thing gets thrown around so.
It's interesting to talk about the scene by Harry Dean Stanton as well. That's another really slow scene, or slow scenes. It takes a while, and you're just literally following him wandering about, whistling, standing under the water, making cat noises, because obviously clearly gone mad from me.
That is, I mean, Harry Dean Stanton was one of the most. He was a brilliant downbeat actor. The idea of him wandering around a spaceship making cat noises, it's just, I don't think you appreciate that fact sometimes. This is he played miserable characters for all of his career, famously so, and to do that, it's just wild. But yeah, I mean, this is, I don't think it really puts a foot wrong, Alien. It's kind of like the perfect horror movie, really, in many ways. But what I really appreciate about it is it kind of invented modern sci-fi horror, and it perfected it at the same time, because everything which came after this, of the space horror, it's basically using the same sort of formula that Alien perfected in 1979.
I mean, even in something where they're not necessarily fighting another organism, the Event Horizon, just the distress beacon not being all it's supposed to be. There is so much that has filtered down, even if it's just something like Sunshine, where it's a similar type of crew. It has just, you can't find another space film that doesn't in some way trace back to this film.
This is kind of maybe not around the birth of the final girl, but certainly we're in a big part of the development of the final girl. We'd recently had Halloween, and then we get Ripley the following year, I think Halloween 78, 77. It's developing that new progression on the character of the final girl, and which has now become a huge horror trope, but also a kind of well-loved trope as well.
It's very different roles for women in this movie as well, because we have Sigourney Weaver, Ripley, and her opposite number, who's got such a great track record for being in horror movies, Veronica Cartwright. She didn't do many, but the ones she did, very, very good. Whereas Sigourney Weaver's very independent, and when things happen, she takes control. She's a feminist icon for all of the right reasons. She's such a good character. So well played by Sigourney Weaver as well.
Mm-hmm.
Basically made her career as well. I think she was only 29 when she did this, and from this, it's like her career just went to the stars, so to speak. But Veronica Cartwright, she just spends, as soon as the stomach bursting happens, she just spends the rest of the movie screaming. I mean, I kind of find she's such a bad character because she gets difficult, blatantly she gets him killed.
Yeah, she does. I mean, let's face it, though, we'd all be Lambert if we were in that situation. I'm not sure how many of us would be Ripley. We'd all be Lambert cowering, going, no.
Yeah, I wouldn't even be. I'd be finding some part of the ship that just you can hide yourself in. There must be somewhere there that the alien can't get to. I suppose if I'd done that, then I would be dead because I'd be floating in space on the shitey part of the Nostromo by the end of it. But yeah, I would 100% cower in fear and just wait for the inevitable pressure in my skull to burst open.
Yeah, but is anything that we haven't mentioned that either of you would like to bring up about Alien? Because this is a movie that's had so much discourse and conversation and so many references to it. But is there anything specific that?
I think for me that as good as Ripley is, we have to bear in mind that originally the character was written for a man, and it was supposed to be a man that played the role until Sigourney sort of came in and read for the part, and Ridley was like, yes. Obviously, it's great that Ridley saw that a woman could play a role like this, but with us saying, Lambert is just this sort of hysterical woman. She was, I guess, originally supposed to be the only woman on the ship. So I think that looking at it through that lens, as good as Ripley is, how much of it would we still be talking about Alien if it had been a man that had played the role?
I think it's kind of the same as Night of the Living Dead. I can never remember the name of the lead actor, but that wasn't intentionally cast as a black man. Romero just cast the best actor for the job, and history's kind of given it this admittedly justified importance, but that was never in Romero's mind. So, similar thing here, maybe?
I mean, the thing with Alien is, as you're saying, there's been so much written and so much said about it and I don't think I'll be able to give anything new or deep that's been said about it. I just think it is, as you're saying, Rob, it's one of the greatest movies ever made, certainly one of the best horror movies ever made, and it's set up so much moving forward, like Kat touched on. Event Horizon and Sunshine, they're two movies that I love as well, that you doubt whether that they would have been able to exist if it hadn't been for the first Alien movie. And it brought a new horror to sci-fi and space in general. I think it was, as you're saying before that, we had Star Wars, we had Star Trek, and I think Tarantino's spoken about making a space horror movie. He'd been talking about making a Star Trek horror movie, and he said the whole horrific part about space is that in itself. And obviously the tagline for this, "In space no one can hear you scream," is quite relevant to that. But he always spoke about there's nothing more horrific than actual being in space and having nowhere else to go, like having it as a haunted house movie. Yeah, it is that, or it could be seen as maybe a bit of a slasher as well.
Yes.
But in those scenarios, there's a front door you can get out, or there's a police officer you can phone, or however hopeless they would be, there's always at least some form of getting out. In this, there's just nothing. You are stuck, and space is just as much an enemy as the xenomorph is in it, really.
It's one of the genres that I love the most, and I think it's mostly because of this. I don't care how bad a space horror is because of Alien. I think I'll watch any of them, honestly.
Even Amityville in Space, have you watched that yet?
Is that a thing?
Oh yeah,
I know there's a lot of Amityvilles. I think 20 odd, but
yeah.
Space.
There's an Amityville in Space, so I mean, it was probably. I assume it will be awful.
Yeah, it's kind of open tender, the Amityville license, so anybody can do anything with it.
And they have Leprechaun in Space. There you go.
Yeah. Well, you're really taking advantage of what I was saying there.
We've not had Freddy in Space yet. It could work somehow.
No, I think he's locked up in contractual messes, so he's not going to be
Bring back Freddy. Imagine that. Everyone's stuck in hypersleep, but someone remembers Freddy, and then he just starts infecting everyone's mind. There you go. There's your Freddy in Space movie.
I've had worse ideas for a Freddy.
Exactly. Sign me up here. Pay me £3 million. I'll do it for that.
Something that's in the novelization that they don't discuss in the film is that their dreams that they're having in hypersleep are recorded. Like, there's been some technology that has been produced that can record their dreams and they can be played back. So that again would tie in quite nicely with a Freddy, because you could literally have, I don't know, some really rich people getting off and watching people have Freddy murder them or something, and the extreme route.
There you go.
Yeah. The only thing I've left to say really is I watched the director's cut.
Right.
I wish I didn't, honestly, because, well, Ridley Scott has a habit of ruining a lot of movies by cutting them to bits and putting like a director's cut, final cut, theatrical cut in front of all of them. And on the Blu-ray for Alien, he appears at the beginning and says, there's some scenes I wanted to reinstall. And this is the first time I've ever seen them when, he did that cut, at least. I think it's a 2003 cut.
Okay.
And the difference is, as far as I can tell, the scene with Harry Dean Stanton sort of wandering before he gets killed, that feels longer.
Right, okay.
It's pretty long anyway, but it feels like there's a whole new room he goes into. But the major scene is, as Ripley's trying to escape, she turns up in this room where she finds out what the xenomorph has done to all of the people. And they're in sort of bubbles on the wall, sort of, just, you've seen Aliens, what was happening there, sort of like stuck in the wall to do whatever in eggs.
No.
I don't know. It's all creepy and horrible, the reasoning and rationale behind it. But I think Tom Skerritt says, kill me, and then she just sets them on fire. Right. And I can understand why it wasn't in the film, because I think it's better. I think the xenomorph is better in this movie because it's an unknowable evil. It's just a monster. It's an unstoppable monster, and it's a killing machine. When you know what it was doing to them, I don't know, it just kind of kills the magic a little bit.
Yeah, because I think the intention was that it was turning them into eggs to then produce a facehugger to then go on. And I just think that is a misstep from Ridley, and I'm glad it got cut out of the main feature, because Cameron's way of looking at them as like an almost ant hive colony with a queen that's laying the eggs made so much more sense. And it's a case of any xenomorph can become a queen if there isn't a queen present. That's better than, let's tie these people, stick these people to the wall and then turn them into an egg because magic. I don't know. I don't quite know how that works. So
yeah, definitely. I watched just the version that's on Disney Plus at the minute, and I don't think that was the director's cut. I never seen that, certainly. Anyway,
it's on Disney Plus. That's crazy.
Aye, yeah.
Ripley is a Disney princess these days.
Yep. It's I'm glad I didn't see. I don't think I've ever seen that actually, because that scene takes away a wee bit, doesn't it? Of the kind
I was just curious what's different, because he has that reputation of just adding stuff all the time. So I thought, what's he done to Alien? Let's have a look.
Aye.
Regretted it instantly.
So these older directors seem to get free rein to do, don't it? Lucas and Spielberg and Ridley Scott, they just chop it and change it as much as they want. Bucket put Ewoks and Alien Nostromo, just Why not?
Yeah, well, as we mentioned in the last episode, apparently Blade Runner and Alien are in the same universe, according to one off line in a deleted scene from Prometheus.
All right, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, it's Ridley Scott tinkering.
Trying to make some sort of... he just needs to stay away from Alien. I think Ridley Scott's last good input to Alien, for me anyway, was Alien. I don't know his full input into James Cameron's version and things like that, but in terms of being the director, once you get back into Prometheus and Covenant, and I think he's producer on this new series that's getting made that's set on Earth, but I don't know if it's set on Earth pre-Alien or post-Alien, or...
I've heard of this.
Yeah, I think it's a Disney Plus. It's going to be a Disney Plus series, obviously, because of the rights and everything over here. But I've not heard a huge amount on it.
See, there is a trilogy of spin-off books that are set on Earth.
Right. Okay.
Earth Hive, Nightmare Asylum, and the Female War. And it's the aliens have got onto Earth and have basically overrun it. And eventually, by like the third book, a mission is mounted to go back to the original planet and like kill all the queens, I think, something like that. But it brings Ripley back as an android.
Right.
But I doubt very much that they would go down that route. But the first couple of books in that series are really good because you've got like New York streets and the xenomorphs are like living in the sewers. So sort of walking at night and they're like popping up out of the sewers and like just dragging people down. And it's a good series of books to read, but I doubt that they would harvest from them, which is a shame.
Interesting.
Well, if they take the beat from what the Predator franchise did, reinventing itself with Prey, which I don't think is the best movie in the world, but I do think it's a very good reinvention of what Predator movies can be. If they follow that sort of example, I think maybe, they could do something interesting with it, but I think Ridley Scott just needs to stay away.
Yeah, I'd agree, yeah. Again, this is going off the back of not seeing Gucci, the House of Gucci, or was it the last... What was the other one? The Last Night or something like that?
The Last Duel?
Last Duel? Yeah, I've not seen them either. I just don't really have much interest in seeing what he's doing anymore because I've put off so much by Prometheus and Covenant.
Covenant especially.
Yeah, especially with Covenant was marketed. It was marketed as if it was going to be this kind of sort of almost return to form by showing you, I think, some clips for the last 15 minutes, maybe. And the rest of it was just utter tripe and terrible CGI aliens, and yeah, it just needs to back off a bit, I think, from it.
Det er selvmord. Elias er god til konflikthåndtering. Han taler deres sprog.
Jeg ved, jeg er derinde. Jeg tror nok også, I kan høre mig. Men vi ved, jeg intet ondt. Og jeg har ikke fået hospitalet. Frans, jeg er ikke sur, fordi du slog Gabo lige i hovedet med den der knogsvane. Det kan vi alle sammen komme til. Men vi er jeres kød og blod. Vi er jeres brødre. Så vi har i hvert fald lige så meget ret til at se vores biologiske forældre, som vi har.
So that takes us to the part of the show where we pick who is going to be coming in a upcoming episode. So on this list, this very, very long list of directors that we have, there is 461 names. So coming up in a future episode is director number 2525.
And that is Anders Thomas Jensen.
Yes, and he's actually a director I've interviewed once upon a time. So
yeah.
Can't say that's a name that jumps off the page, really.
Men and Chicken is one of my favorites.
Yes, I do recall that.
He just recently made the film Riders of Justice, which was why I got to interview him. So,
which is a movie with Matt Mikkelsen, and it's so good. It's so good.
It's a weird one, that, isn't it? It's, if I remember this correctly, it kind of goes all over the place, genre-wise.
Very much so.
Yes.
Very much so.
Ex-military man played by Matt Mikkelsen.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of quotation marks nerds who are specialists in all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a plot in there to it gets a bit messy, doesn't it?
It gets messy and lots. Yes.
I think we both really enjoyed this film, though. Am I right, Rabia?
Oh yeah, I loved it. I watched it during a festival, and after it, I was like, I need to watch this again. This is amazing. The interpersonal relationships between Mads and the nerds and his daughter, very important.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, the sort of like terrorist, quote unquote terrorist attack that they're hyper focused on. The loss and grief, like the emotional implications of losing a character. Then I'm not going to spoil too much, but there's a significant death, and that's at the beginning. That kind of spirals everything, like kind of jump starts everything into motion, and then that ending where there is a conclusion and there are answers. They're just not per se satisfactory to everyone.
Exactly. And it's actually funny. I talked to Anders Thomas Jensen specifically about the ending of his film and how it reminded me a little bit of Kieslowski's Blind Chance. And he was like, "Who's Kieslowski?" And I was like, "No, everybody just knows Krzysztof Kieslowski." Anyway, but yeah, no, I absolutely love the kind of chaos theory nature of, where that film goes, and it's beautiful.
I absolutely love that sort of Scandinavian comedy drama as well, where it's about very, very serious things, and it is also very, very dark in its humour.
Yep.
So, yes, excellent. Looking forward to that one in a future episode.
What? You're not gonna give up on me, are you? What do you mean? You're not gonna make a deal with that guy? I mean, I just want to know.
Thelma, I'm not making any deals.
I mean, I'd understand if you're thinking about it. In a way, you got something to go back for. Jimmy.
Jimmy's not an option.
But, I don't know, something's like crossed over in me. And I can't go back. I mean, I just couldn't live.
I know. I know what you mean. Anyway, don't want to end up on the damn Geraldo show.
Yeah.
They're charging us with murder. Yeah, they say that we gotta figure out if we want to come in dead or alive.
Gosh.
That leads us to the second movie of the night, 1991's Thelma and Louise, which came off the back of Black Rain, which I'd hoped we'd do, but, outvoted. I'm okay to admit that. So,
I've never seen that either. Is it good?
I can't remember. It's Ridley Scott doing a Japanese crime movie, so it's interesting.
Interesting, at least, yeah.
Yeah, Gina Davis is Thelma, who's a put-upon wife. She's lacking in confidence. She's got her husband at home, Daryl, who's sort of typical 90s douchebag, and her best friend is Susan Sarandon, Louise. And we join them as they basically go on a girls' holiday, wherever. They just go, have fun, run away from their other halves and have some fun. They go to the most questionable bar in existence. It's got line dancing. It's just horrible, absolutely horrible. And while there, Thelma hits it off with he seems like a charming enough, but
persistent.
Not the sort of person you want to spend more than 5 minutes with, sort of guy. So they do some line dancing, have some drinks, and they end up in the car park because Thelma needs some air. She's feeling a little bit sicky. And then the guy tries to rape her, basically. Louise turns up, shoots him, he dies, and then they go on the run together, Thelma and Louise. Two girls on the run, a road trip movie, a Lovers on the Run style movie. And yes, it all leads to a very, very famous ending.
I like Thelma and Louise. It was horribly spoiled by me, though, because The Simpsons did an episode on it, and I saw The Simpsons episode far before I saw Thelma and Louise. So when I was sat there, like as a teenager watching it, it's like, this is just that episode of The Simpsons. But I think it holds up. It's, again, like with Alien, it's got some horribly still relevant topics that it explores. I think during my rewatch, though, the thing that I was most horrified by is the fact that they're literally my age. I remember watching it the first time, and they were like these like old women, like Thelma's a housewife, and then I suddenly realised that they're like in their late 30s, and it's like, oh crap! I guess I need to go and find myself like a Thelma or a Louise so I can go on like one of these like girls trips. Cause
it's for me. Well, Susan Sarandon was on a killer run in the 90s, and she's great on this. But on a more basic level, I really, really like 90s crime movies.
Okay.
I don't know what it is. I think it was just they were a little bit more fearless at that time. The stories had a little more of a sense of danger. They were more iconic. I mean, there's so many directors at that time who were making stuff like this. The Coens, for example, is just one. Director duo that were making 90s crime movies. But yeah, I honestly think as far as that canon of classics, you can also throw Quentin Tarantino in there. You mentioned him earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So many classic films with classic filmmakers making their crust with this style of movie in the 90s. And honestly, I think Thelma and Louise is among the better of them.
It was a first time watch for me, but I definitely see what you're saying about those kind of 90s crime movies, and it kind of reminded me a lot of Tony Scott's True Romance. There's definitely a feel of two people who have ended up in a situation that is kind of over their heads, and they've got in too deep, and everything's sort of snowballing through decisions of their own and decisions that other people make, and it's just kind of it's just kind of enveloping them into this more, while keeping it light to an extent, but more murky situation and world.
Yeah, because the rape in question, which all of this takes place in, nobody needs to die, but you totally understand why he does. It's just, it kind of plays into the vision of men in this movie. Men do not get off well in this.
No. It's, I think literally Michael Madsen is probably the nicest man in this film, and that to me was jarring because I've only ever really seen him play bad guys and corrupt people. So suddenly he is a moral compass for the men in the film. That's saying much for you guys.
It really doesn't. I mean, the reason why he dies is she's saved in the rape, and he says, "Oh, suck my cock," and then she shoots him. Oh yeah, fair enough. Given the way that went down, I don't blame her at all. But it just gets worse from there. I mean, when the police fronted by Hy-Vee Cartel, which again is just the embarrassment of riches for actors these movies had in the 90s. It's so vast. But there's a scene when him and the police force he is running says to Daryl, who is, oh my God, that's like toxic masculinity, the Avatar, isn't it?
Yeah.
I feel like this was what like Shooter McGavin was like before he went on to be in Happy Gilmore, and it seems like the time before it, he was always a massive dick, and he just ended up getting a lucky break and ended up being a golfer.
But I think that one of the policemen says, "I'll just say you care about her and you miss her. Chicks love all that sort of shit." It's like, wow, the 90s were different, weren't they?
Aye.
So different.
It was God, I can't even remember his name. He was in The Lost Boys, and he was in One Division, I think. I know he was in One Division, definitely. The police officer you're talking about, and I think he not play the main, ends up being the main vampire in The Lost Boys? Is it him, or am I getting mixed up with someone else? It might. I could be 100% wrong, but in my head, that is that guy. In fact, and I'm not going off anything. So I'm probably very wrong. But yeah, men don't come across well in this, and obviously they're not meant to. Your main heroes, if you're anti-heroes, if you will, are the fantastic Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon in this. Both of them are just outstanding, and their character development throughout the whole movie, the way their approach changes to the situation is great.
The sort of crisscrossing and about who's got the dominant personality, about who's the just let's word it like that. Who's got the dominant personality? Because initially it's Susan Sarandon. She's confident. She doesn't take any crap whatsoever. But killing a guy, it loosens her up a little bit too much, maybe. And you see sides of her personality when she's with Michael Madsen, who genuinely is very sweet in this Outside One Outburst. So weird.
Yeah.
I mean, he plays assholes and scumbags.
I mean, I still think he is probably overall an arsehole and a scumbag, but he does...
Oh, yeah. On the sliding scale, he's quite nice.
Yeah, in comparison, yeah. Maybe Harvey Keitel above him is his motivation, maybe. I think he's an odd one to take.
The most positive male role model, I guess, if you want to use that term in this, weirdly, is Brad Pitt.
Okay, I know, and he's a dick as well.
Yeah, but I imagine a lot of teen hearts were aflutter when they saw a teenage Brad Pitt in this, because he's a handsome boy in this. He really is, isn't he?
Yeah.
It's one of his first roles. This is one of the things that got him out there.
Mm. Yes. The reason why I say that, George, just to justify myself, I'm not saying wild things and not backing myself up. A lot of the older characters, male characters, are kind of the misogynist mindset is very much deep within them.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene when all the sort of cards are laid out, when Brad Pitt's being interrogated by Harvey Keitel and the other guy, the actor who I can't remember his name, and he has this little off-the-cuff comment, which it just feels like sort of an intergenerational thing, like the old sort of misogynistic generation and a younger generation, when he just makes a comment about the fact that they're very close and they should get together too, the two policemen. It just feels there's an awareness there sort of the character goes, whereas Brad Pitt, the other characters, all act like that because that's how they act.
Mm.
Seems to be more of a level of awareness with Brad Pitt, that he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I think he certainly comes across sweeter towards Thelma.
He's playing the game there, though, isn't he?
Yeah, I think there's an element of that, and another line in the interrogation, I can't remember it off by heart, but he says something, and it sounded like he sounded maybe slightly concerned for Thelma in the situation that she got in after the armed robbery. He was, I mean, he didn't know, I'm assuming he didn't know that there was $6,500 in an envelope in her room. I'm maybe looking at that, trying to paint him in a better light. I think he's opportunistic, maybe more.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think when we meet him as a hitchhiker, he's kind of that nomadic creature who's just, enjoying the highway of life, living from car to car. And I think he does connect with Thelma. He sees that Thelma has been horribly treated by her husband. He picks up on that quite quickly. And I guess he steals their money, but I guess you could argue that he does give something to the women that a lot of the other men don't. A lot of the other men are taking from them, and he satisfies Thelma in the way that she hasn't been before.
Mm-hmm. And the fact
which is then it then opens Thelma up to become her true self, because it's after that encounter with JD that she starts to really change her outlook.
Mm-hmm. And it's another way, maybe on the other side, where Brad Pitt is looking at him, is the minute that Michael Madsen turns up, he just goes, right, I need to go. And then he's waited until later on when Thelma's on her own. I think you can look at his character through a number of different lenses, but he certainly brings Thelma into this movie more as the comfortable outlaw, if that's maybe the way, because she seems besotted with the whole outlaw idea of him, and is more than happy to take it on, obviously, when she copies his lines for robbing a store. And it's probably the most important part of Thelma's journey is meeting him, because it lets her become, or it shows her that she can become more than what she has been at home under Darryl, the massive dickhead who stands on pizzas.
Well, I mean, it's not just that. I mean, she was like, she was really nervous about the conversation. She's bleeding her heart out, and he stops paying attention and starts paying attention to the football on TV.
Mm-hmm.
It's just all the classic sort of stereotypes of horrible men, basically.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the opening of this film is great. I think Ridley Scott has done some really, really good editing and pacing, because when I was watching it back, in the first 5 minutes, you have this phone call between Louise and Thelma. By the end of that phone call, you already know everything pretty much you need to know about these two women. And then you fast forward that to 10 minutes where you see them packing for leaving. You've got Thelma, who is literally tipping drawers into suitcases, juxtaposed with Louise, who is putting her shoes into plastic bags. You instantly know these two very different personality types, and you've not even seen them share the screen together yet. I think it's really quick and clear, because this film's over 2 hours long, but we're 10 minutes in, you already know who these women are without them having to sit and have a conversation about, oh, my husband, he doesn't listen to me, blah, 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 blah. It gets right in there in a really quick and fast way, which the pacing of Alien takes forever to sort of get where it's going. But this, by 25 minutes, they've killed a man and they're on the run. It's insane, the pacing.
One question I have to ask, I mean, Kat did skate around it. It's a movie where its ending's more famous than the actual movie. So I guess I have to ask Andy that question, knowing the ending and this being your first time watch, does it work despite, I mean, you know how it ends. It is one of the most famous endings of modern American cinema. But despite knowing that, does it still work?
Oh, definitely. I thought this was fantastic watching it. I think you're just immediately besotted with Thelma and Louise because of the two central performances. In terms of the ending itself, I think you maybe question Louise and her decision not to go to the police, but then that's quite kind of what we spoke about with certain themes in Alien being timeless. It's still relevant nowadays if women feel that they could be believed by going to the police. So it's a difficult one, because at that point, once that decision's made, that's when they can't really go back. I mean, I know Harvey Keitel tries to convince them. He says, you'll think it's an accident, but you don't believe necessarily that even he believes that. And then things, as I said, they snowball out of control a wee bit, and they end up in other sort of armed robberies and kidnapping a police officer. And the whole thing, just for me, and I said, I think it was 2 hours and 12 minutes, 2 hours and 15 minutes, didn't feel that at all. I thought it was just wonderful. And you have the odd set pieces, but the main intrigue is the characters and their journey, their progression, their development, their, as you said, the kind of switching of the roles between who's the more dominant, which changes and maybe becomes more Thelma at one point, taking the lead, as we kind of spoke on, the kind of glorious outlaw. It flies by, it whips up, and I don't know if he's got a director's cut, but I really hope he doesn't.
Really
doesn't need it. I don't think there's a flaw in this movie at all, to be honest.
So that same question to you, Kath. Does it work knowing the ending?
Yeah, because I think even though you know the ending, and I mean, it was The Simpsons that I knew the ending from, it doesn't have that emotional impact at all. I mean, even this is like my third or fourth time watching it, suddenly the emotional impact of the fact that these women they know that they're going into the Grand Canyon. They would rather do that than go back and go to the police, because they know that they're not going to be believed. I mean, Louise, something has obviously happened in Texas that they discussed. She's obviously been through the police procedure before and wasn't taken seriously. So now she can never go back to where she came from. And as I'm older and I'm watching it, I was always in tears, because it's like, you want them to win. You know, you want these women to win. You've spent 2 hours with them. And despite, I think almost knowing what's coming is even worse, because as much as you love them, you know that it's not going to get any better. And the fact that they're happy in that, they're going out, you know, the big like sort of fuck you to the patriarchy. I think it's timeless. I think, you know, if they were to do screenings of it again, it would pick up. In fact, going off on a tangent, there's a film called Witch Hunt, I think it is in America, in the UK, which came out earlier this year, which is a supernatural film to do with witches existing and being persecuted, and it's the whole of riff on the Underground Railroad. And the main character in that, this teenage girl, is obsessed with Thelma Louise. So I feel like there's a whole new generation that might find it through that film. Although, again, the ending is heavily spoiled for them. I feel like no one can talk about Thelma Louise without telling people the ending. It's a bit ridiculous.
I definitely still felt there was an emotional kind of resonance with it. I think it's the point where they accept their fate and they seem quite content and quite happy with what they're about to do. Like, genuinely happy. I mean, it's almost like happy tears that they've got when it's happening.
That is better than the alternative. That is better than not being believed or going back to, like, in the metaphor that it is in a lot of ways, to an abusive relationship, domestic abuse. That's certain parallels it draws.
Yeah, because Thelma had said that before as well. She said, I can't go back, I couldn't live, I think is the line. I can't go back to what I had before. She's now had this taste of a different, better life, and to her it's a different, better life. And
it's unspoken. That is an unspoken aspect of her backstory. But like Kat said, she doesn't mention it. It's just heavily implied.
And I think as well, less a filmmaker maybe would have had it as a standoff, as in an actual, because you see Susan Sarandon starting to kind of load her gun and make sure she's got enough bullets, and you feel that she's wanting to charge down the police and go out in a blaze of glory. And I think a lesser filmmaker could have ended it on that. Maybe if it was made in the wrong era, it could have been done like that. But it's essentially they're ending their life on their own choice, but they're ending their life more so on their own terms than charging a bunch of machine gun toting police officers, which I think is quite
it's a
relevant.
pretty big overreaction, isn't it? I mean, you probably look at this. I mean, it is made by a Brit. I don't know who wrote the script, what their nationality is.
It's an American, a Texan woman, Callie Curry, who went on to write the TV series Nashville, the country music series. Maybe
a sort of level of willful subtext there, just of how grand an overreaction this is. Even when it's just like a murder, all the weight of everything that comes down on two women, it's excessive, very excessive.
Even Harvey Keitel's character even mentions that, doesn't he? He says, "What is all this? This is ridiculous. Don't kill those two women. Why have you got all these guys here?" And the other police officer, who can't remember his name or the actor's name, is just like, the bald guy is just like, it's standard procedure because they're armed. He's like, no, I don't think so. Like, and again, you've seen police reactions to certain atrocities over the past couple of years have been less than forceful, is maybe the right phrase to use, has been maybe a bit standoffish when they should have been more proactive. And it could be it's maybe a bit of a commentary on that, where they feel more confident going for the women than they would if it was a teenage white boy shooting up a school.
Oh wow, don't sugarcoat that, Andy.
No. You've seen it, that's what happens though, isn't it? Like they do. It is, yeah. Well, we can't go in there, he's got a gun. But, well, that's your whole purpose of your line of work at the minute, is to maybe not let the kids get killed and have a bit of bravery instead of absolutely shitting yourself and standing back.
Yeah.
But if it was a woman that was in there, or if it was a black shooter, they would have went in, stormed in, all guns blazing.
Yeah, it's very pointedly political, and I think it's mostly ageless, basically. Any closing thoughts on this before we wrap up on Thelma Louise, Kat? Anything?
I'm always a big fan of a road movie. And the fact that this is a road movie definitely speaks to its favour. I like the difference between this and an Alien, in not necessarily the representation of the women, but just the look of the film. You've got Alien, which is dark, and then you've got Thelma Louise, which is pretty much like all daylight, open roads. So I like the fact that Ridley is a director that can change a lot, because otherwise he's probably better known for his Blade Runners and Alien. He can do stuff like this, which is just a road movie drama.
Yeah. Andy, anything?
In terms of this movie, it's probably comfortably my second favourite Ridley Scott movie of what I've seen. and again, I haven't seen many of them, and I'm going off of a fairly recency bias can obviously colour things a wee bit, but in terms of enjoyment, I just absolutely loved it. And just as Kat saying, the difference, between this and Alien, where Alien was a very methodically paced and deliberately slow movie, with this one, he just gets it ticking all the way through without necessarily having, apart from one explosive set piece with an explosion, just with I think the humour in it is what is...
There's a joy for life.
Yeah, that's exactly the exact phrase I was looking for. I just couldn't put it into words. He just nails it, and Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis are fantastic in it. I like watching Harvey Keitel and everything. Even though he's very similar kind of character he plays in a lot of these movies, but I really liked him, and I love seeing Brad Pitt, Ken Ellie Doors, just being charming, and I just think it was a fantastic movie. And I'd probably say comfortably my second favourite Ridley Scott, and I include Blade Runner in that because I have seen Blade Runner. But I'm more of a 2049 fan anyway. So
okay, so he's at the end of his career. Let's not overword it. So as far as a legacy of a director, what do you believe Ridley Scott's legacy to the world of films is?
His legacy to the world of film is going to be Alien and Blade Runner. The stuff that he did for sci-fi is going to be what he's best remembered for. But then when you look at his CV, that's such a small part of the work that he's done. It seems like something like Thelma Louise will get overlooked, maybe Gladiator, but I think it's his work in sci-fi that's going to be remembered. And I guess for also making, at least earlier in his career, believable characters that you wanted to hang out with. I would have a drink with the crew of the Nostromo. I would have a drink with Thelma Louise. He made these characters timeless because they were just people.
Yes, they were. Andy?
In terms of his legacy, I think he will be remembered. I think more so for his earlier stuff. His character development and his world building is maybe not right, but his relationship building in his earlier movies. Even Blade Runner, as a kind of sci-fi classic, is quite a lot based around Harrison Ford's development more as a person than just, again, your generic sci-fi set pieces. I think his character work is certainly what's going to be his, for me anyway, and I think his lasting memory.
Yes, I couldn't really have added anything to either of what you said there. I do think his legacy will come from his early work, because he is a director who was, I wouldn't use the word self-sabotaging, but the later into his career he got, the more inconsistent he became, I think it would be fair to say.
One thing I would like to say is The Martian. I rewatched that recently, and I think that is a very underrated movie. I have a lot of fun with it. It's not necessarily the best movie that's ever been made, but I think that's him getting back to, again, likeable characters.
Yeah, I think a great deal of that is Drew Goddard's script, because he did Cabin in the Woods and a few other bits and pieces, but...
well, that would definitely help then. But yeah, I just thought the characters in that, and again, Matt Damon, Jessica Chastain, and again, stacked casts, as we always have mentioned with his movies. It was not necessarily a huge return to form, but in terms of the characters were likeable, and I could sit and watch the film. It was maybe a wee bit long, but it was just certainly an enjoyable experience, and a quite uplifting movie, I think, as well, which is not necessarily something you get with him.
Yeah, he's got a few things planned for coming up as well. Apparently he's doing a sequel to Gladiator, and that's in pre-production.
Tell me Russell Crowe's not in it.
Allegedly, Chris Hemsworth is in it.
I like Chris Hemsworth, but no. And
he's also apparently, well, not apparently, it's all but done, I imagine. Napoleon. He's doing that with Joaquin Phoenix in the titular role.
Okay, that could be interesting. More for the Joaquin Phoenix side.
reviving a relationship that he started in Gladiator.
Yeah, and that's going to be over 3 hours, isn't it? And I don't think I can sit through a Ridley Scott movie. It's longer than 3 hours.
Napoleon's story isn't a short one.
No, unlike the man himself. But
harsh. Okay, so I think that calls a wrap to this week's episode. Kat, where can we find you and your work online?
So, whilst it still exists, I'm on Twitter at Gizmo Shikari, and should, by the time this goes to air, Twitter be a distant memory, I'm also on Hive at CatHeat.
Excellent. And Andy?
Yeah, you can get me on Twitter at Knowhere Andy. The podcast is at Where Is Knowhere. We also have Instagram at Road to Knowhere Podcast, which I've remembered this time, which I usually forget, so I'm quite happy with that. It's obviously sticking. And yeah, I do a wee bit of writing for yourself on the Geek show recently on Wounded Fawn, which was the hardest thing I've ever had to write, because I still don't really understand what happened with that movie, but I enjoyed it, I think. But yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me.
Excellent. And you can keep up to date with the podcast. Oh, the social medias they've developed as a situation, haven't they? I'm on Mastodon. Look for Uncut Rubcast on there, you'll find me. However that works, it's a mess. Otherwise, I'm on Instagram, Hive, Twitter, and here's an ugly thing to say that comes out, the words that are coming out of my mouth. I'm also on TikTok. All of them are at Uncut Rubcast. So please check them out. Until next time, this has been Directors Uncut, and thanks for listening.